Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Breaking Into Cybersecurity. Today we have the awesome Rey on with us, and I've been following Rey for a long time and finally had the opportunity, reached out to him, and was happy to have him on. He has a really cool story to tell, but before I jump it over to him, if you're following us live on LinkedIn, don't forget to follow Rey, follow myself, reach out a connection if you love his story. If you're following us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button. And if you're listening to us after the fact on your favorite podcast channel, don't forget to subscribe and share with everyone. That's how we can get more folks into the community and loving cybersecurity, because that's what this whole podcast is about. So Rey, tell us about your background and let's get started there.
No, well, thank you so much for the warm intro. That's too kind of you, and I appreciate it. It's great to be here, and it's been a long journey. It's not something that happened overnight. It's something that has kind of been growing for some time, and so I spent a lot of time as a software developer. That was my focus. That's where my world was, and primarily it was interesting because I really started the transition to cybersecurity in 2017. Prior to that, I had spent quite a bit of time at Microsoft, just doing developer relations, focusing on the web developer community, trying to understand the things that made them tick and how I can help them out. And then around 2017, I wanted to kind of explore some other options in terms of the industry and what I could talk about. And I noticed that security was something that a lot of developers weren't really talking about. And so I started digging into it. And the more I dug into it, the more fascinated I became with the concept of securing code and securing software. And then WannaCry hit. And when WannaCry hit, that was a big deal. I mean, you looked at some of the issues that WannaCry caused, the issues in the UK with the national healthcare system and hospitals being closed and patients being turned away. And I said, this is a good opportunity for me to start looking into this and seeing how I can help. And so that's what I did. I started exploring it. I dug deeper, and I remember that I reached out to a corporate vice president at Microsoft, Ann Johnson, and we started talking, and I pitched her an idea and said, look, I think there's a need for a person who can go out to the community and have conversations and understand what's going on and help to build bridges. And she liked the idea. So she funded me, and she funded me to go out to conferences and get training and kind of ramp up in the industry. And so I was very fortunate and very grateful for that. And I remember when I went to my first DEF CON, I was sold. That was it. I was like, I love the community. I loved the vibe. I loved how everybody was excited about protecting things and all the nuances. It was kind of something new for me. Having spent so much time doing one thing, now I'm in a whole new world, and it's like I'm reinvigorated. I felt like when I first started programming, and so I just took off with it. And I will say that once I popped my first shell, that was it. I was done. So.
Let's take a break and say hello to some of the listeners that we have. Hey, Ali. Hey, Joshua. Hey, Simon. Hey, Murray. Simon's over in the UK. Hey, Katrina. Hey, Rudolph from Amsterdam. Thanks all for listening. So Rey, you mentioned that you're working developer relations in a big company like Microsoft.
Right.
I'm guessing like working outside of the group that you're in and going to another group, like, were there challenges in doing that, or was that a fairly smooth transition for you?
No, it definitely wasn't smooth. And so I think the big thing is that when you don't have experience, a lot of people kind of won't give you the opportunities. And again, I know how fortunate I am. I've spoken to so many people in the community that would love to be a security practitioner, and just they've gone through training and they've invested time and they haven't had that opportunity, that person who believes in them and says, I'm going to give you that shot. And so it definitely was that. And it was hard to kind of, balance out this desire for something new and the desire to go down this path while still maintaining a job, because I had work demands and I had things that had to get accomplished, but I knew where my heart was, and my heart was someplace else, and I wanted to explore. So it was a lot of juggling of time. Thankfully, I have a very understanding family, and so they afforded me that time as well. And so between work and getting work done, and then spending evenings trying to learn something brand new, it was a challenge. It was hard. It was time consuming. And then the other part was just trying to identify, how do I break into this industry? Without having to start from scratch in terms of my career. And that's the other part of it. I think one of the biggest challenges that most people are going to find if they decide that they want to transition in security, especially if they have a very long career, is that when you want to switch careers, you're going to have to make a very hard choice. You're going to have to say, all right, I need to gain that experience, so I'm going to have to start from the bottom and go up. And that typically means you're going to have to kind of check your ego at the door, but also from a compensation perspective, that could be impacted. You might have to down level yourself and say, all right, I may have been a top dog here, but now I'm going to have to come down, and everything has to be adjusted with it, from your position, your status, to your compensation, and all those things matter. And when you have a family, it's really hard to do that. It can be a big challenge.
Well, let's talk about that. Like, what were some of the things that you did from developer relations to start to increase your knowledge in cybersecurity before you got that first role in cybersecurity relations under Ann Johnson?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And so the first thing I did was I needed to understand, is this a community I even want to be a part of? And I think that's one of the reasons I really wanted to go to DEF CON. I wanted to understand it. And I just wanted to see how people were. I had a really good understanding of the web developer community. I had lived that for so long. So I knew how the community worked. I knew the ebbs and flows, and security is a whole different world. I have to tell you that when I was prepping for DEF CON, I was really scared to go. I really was. I pictured all these, the hordes at the gate banging down, and everybody talking about, oh, you have to have a burner phone, you have to have a burner laptop, and you have to wear, RFID this. And so it freaked me out. I was very concerned about getting compromised and people just being aggressive and things like that. And when I got there, it was very different. And I think that's one of the reasons that it sold me. I felt like this genuine connection with folks, and they had a genuine interest in just bringing new people in. And of course, you're always going to have folks that are kind of the gatekeepers. Those are the ones that, they want to be the blockers to anything. But I'm going to say the majority of people I met in cybersecurity so far have been great. They've been supportive. They wanted to help me out. That was one of the things that sold me. And so as I got convinced that this is where I wanted to go, then I started exploring what I wanted to do. And of course, in cybersecurity, Chris, you know how it is. It's such a vast area. I mean, you can say, everybody talks about, oh yeah, let's go hack. Well, okay, but what does that actually mean? Do you want to be a pen tester? Do you want to be an incident responder? Do you want to do digital forensics? Is OSINT your thing? Is it, maybe you want to work in a SOC? Maybe you want to be a threat analyst. There's so many components of it. And the one thing that I gravitated to right from the beginning, and I have to say, I think it was I have a little different color hat in me back here. So, I have my white hat, but I think there's a different color hat back here that I must have switched, because I instantly gravitated to offensive security. The whole concept of pen testing and identifying, initial vectors of compromise and helping customers find that just fascinated me. And so I continued to explore down that path, and took my first course with Matthew Hickey of Hacker House. And that's where I got my first shell, and sat there in disbelief of how easy it looked. And now clearly it's, here's the thing, now that I've been doing this for a while, I know it's not that easy, but the fact that you could do it, and it was in a VM, but I'm sitting there saying, oh my God, I have complete total access and control of this machine sitting here from my machine, and that floored me. And then you start digging deeper, and you realize there's so many opportunities to learn new things. And I just continued down that path. And Don Denzel, of what used to be called eLearn Security, now it's INE, he helped me down the path as well. He helped me get more experience, and I got introduced to the eLearn Security curriculum. That was a big help for me because it gave me the foundations of security. It helped me understand some of the inner workings and some of the things that were important to learn as an offensive security practitioner. But the biggest thing for me has really been just getting hands-on. There's something to be said for practicing. And it's interesting, what do they say? If you don't use it, you lose it. And in offensive security, or in security in general, I think if you don't use it, you lose it. And there were times when I would get really deep into it, and then work would call and it'd pull me away, and I couldn't do my hacking or my practicing. And I would come back and I'm like, oh, where do I start? And I don't care what anybody says, pen testing and offensive security is not like you just ride a bike and go forward. Yeah, you'll pick it up again, but it takes a while to get your mind back into it and start moving in the right direction. I think the thing that struck me the most is that you really do have to learn how to code. That's the bottom line. Like right now, I'm learning C#. I've taken it upon myself to learn C# because from a tradecraft perspective, so many people use C#. And from my job perspective at Veracode, that's one of the things that's critical. A lot of our clients use C#, so I want to help understand how that code works so that when I talk to our clients, I can help protect them. And so it's a dual benefit. But bottom line is, if you don't know how to code in security, it makes things way harder for you. It makes it way harder for you to build new tools, to understand how systems work and how they can tie into your overall strategy for securing stuff. So, and I know I've been talking, I know that was a long-winded thing, but it's just, there's so many things. I could tell you a whole lot more, but I know we only have 30 minutes, so I'll give it back to you.
Oh, I'm sure. One of the things that you mentioned was a misconception that individuals have coming into cybersecurity, and DEF CON was one of them. What was potentially another major misconception that you think those outside of cybersecurity have of cybersecurity that was shattered when you look behind the glass?
Yeah, I think that there's a very big disconnect between what security professionals think developers do and what developers think security professionals do, and that's one of the biggest challenges. And so I've been on both sides now, so I've been very fortunate. And so developers always feel like security is it's something that's important, but in many cases is not part of their core responsibility. And I understand it, because if you look at developers, they're builders. Their job is to build these really unique experiences and get something up and going, and they have a lot of pressure. And security professionals view developers as kind of like these, I'm going to call these prima donna rock stars. And I've had these conversations, so I'm talking from my experiences. Now, I'm generalizing clearly, but I've spoken to plenty of security professionals who just view developers as like, yeah, they just do their thing, they just code, and they don't care about security. And I think there's some misconceptions between the two. I think there's a growing group of developers that really care about security. They realize, especially in light of things like SolarWinds and Kaseya and Apache Struts with Equifax and things like that, that software security matters. And one of the things I would stress to security professionals is that I think there has to be a greater understanding of how the two can work together, because ultimately, both groups need to work in tandem to secure things and understand the priorities of both groups. And that's one of the challenges that a lot of companies face, these silos of groups, these silos of different priorities, and people not talking to each other and working in tandem to move together in the right direction. So those are the misconceptions I see right now.
Okay. One of the questions from one of the audience members, John, he says, what a great resource for us all. I enjoyed Ray's inputs on knowing your strengths and your choice of careers. One of his questions was, what would you recommend to someone starting to learn to code in the middle of their career?
That's a good question. And it just depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're brand new to security and you're trying to make a transition, start learning to code now. I would say almost learn it before you even try to learn pen testing or learn something else. And the reason is because there's so many cases where you look at job opportunities and they say you have to be very proficient in X programming language. It might be Python, PowerShell, Go, C Sharp, C, C++. So I would say try to get ahead of the curve on that and learn as quickly as possible, because that's going to make you more successful as you dig deeper into your security field. But I think it also matters which part of the security industry you're heading to. So for example, if you said, I want to be a pen tester or I want to be a red teamer, I would definitely say, start learning the code right now. Just do it. If you want to work in application security, start learning the code right now. You have to. If you're in things like digital forensics or threat analyst, I can't say it, I'm tongue-tied. If you want to be a threat analyst or do threat intelligence, I don't have enough experience in those fields to tell you, is coding really relevant? I'm assuming it might be, but I think it just depends on the field you're heading to. And then once you've identified the field you're heading to, the area of security that you want to jump into, that's where you're going to decide what language should I learn. I'm going to give you an example. If you told me I want to be a threat analyst or I want to work in threat intelligence, you're probably going to want to learn Python along with something like Pandas, which is a machine learning format that you can use to help manipulate the data sets that you're working with. So Python would be really important for that. If you're going to do offensive security, well, if you're going to do pen testing or red teaming, the majority of these folks that I'm talking to of late are either doing Python, C Sharp, or C++. And more, you're going to see things like Go and even NIM, which I hadn't heard about NIM until recently. So, it just depends on which area you're going to approach.
Okay, perfect. Now let's think about your transition. So you left Microsoft. You're looking for a more security-focused role. Like, what was that like for you during that transition? Like, how did you approach it? What struggles did you or didn't you have as you looked for that more formal role?
Yeah. So one of the challenges that I had was that because I didn't have that formal, long security history, getting an opportunity within Microsoft and the security teams was really challenging. Obviously, Microsoft wants to build world-class security teams. They want people with good experience, and I understand that the scale that they're working at, they require some really talented people. So when I would approach some of these recs that were open within Microsoft, you could see that I just wasn't a fit. But I definitely had really good developer skills and developer pedigree. And thankfully, I had met Chris Weissopel. He goes by WellPalm. He's one of the OG hackers. Most people would know him from, the CDC days and stuff like that. And so I think that was a great relationship to build. And when I started speaking to him, they had a need for somebody to come in a developer relations role. They wanted to have somebody who can bridge the conversations between the developer community and the security community, but also be able to help developers better understand how security fits in their development workflow. I had that understanding. That was what I had been doing since 2017, developing those skills and better understanding how security works within the developer landscape. So I was very fortunate that Veracode had an opportunity at that time, and it allowed me to transition over. It was hard to leave Microsoft because I had been at Microsoft for 10 years. It wasn't like I was leaving Microsoft because Microsoft was a bad company. It was at that moment, Microsoft couldn't afford me what I wanted, which was the ability to be more technically hands-on with security and be able to help people with security. I was doing kind of a business development role in security at Microsoft, and that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And so Chris and the team at Veracode afforded me a great opportunity, and that's where I transitioned over.
Nice. So it sounds like networking was one of the big things that helped you with that new role, and that also being able to tell your story in a new light and highlighting your transferable skills for that role, like, really helped you out in that new position, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've been an advocate of for a very long time is networking. it's hard. It's not easy for a lot of people to do this, because when you're networking, that means that you have to be proactive in reaching out to people and getting to know people. One of my favorite sayings, and I say this to everybody, is that I like to shake hands and kiss babies. I like to go out there and meet people and have conversations. I mean, Chris, that's how you and I met, basically. And so I like to be boots on the ground at conferences. I'm the type of person, I kid you not, that I will see some random person sitting at a conference, and I'll sit next to them and just strike up a conversation just to get to know them. And the reason is because as a developer evangelist, I had to have those skills. I had to go out and put myself out to be able to speak to the community, give presentations. Public speaking is hard, and it's not easy for a lot of folks to do it. I would urge anybody who wants to build a greater network to learn how to put yourself out a little bit. Doesn't mean you have to be a speaker, doesn't mean you have to do conference talks, but if you're going to, if you want to build this network, you have to be active on social media. You have to bring value to the conversation. You have to make yourself human. And especially in these days of COVID where everything's virtual, it's really important to go out there and try to have some semblance of human conversation and human interaction. So I would say networking is one of my fortes. It's one of my big strengths. I like to call it my superpower. And if you talk to anybody, they always they say that I'm a bit of a ham. I like to, and I do. I love being on camera. I get on it. Much to the chagrin of my kids, because then they're like, "Oh God, Dad's dancing on camera again," you know. But I would say try to put yourself out there. Try to have those conversations with others and get to know them. But listen, that's the big thing. I would say listen to other people. It's not about what you are doing, it's about what they're doing, and then figure out where you can fit within their life, because then they feel like you respect what they bring to the table and that you're helping them be better people.
So now you're in a more formalized security role. You're looking to keep up. Everyone's talking about DevOps, DevSecOps, although the developers hate the sec part in there, and the security people want it in there. So how do you work to build in security from design, shift it left, and keep up with all the tools that are coming out to help with that, and help everyone be safer for the long run, and not just using a specific tool?
No, that's great. And I think part of that is to first, I think you need to get security to be front and center. You know, that one of the challenges that every security practitioner says is that they never get enough investment in security. And the only time they get investment in security is when something bad happens. And so I think it's important to have developers understand that security needs to be part of their DNA as well. It's not just let's build code and then put it out there and hope for the best. It has to just be part of your day-to-day workflow. And it's hard because developers aren't trained to be security professionals. You look even in colleges, you can find any boot camp, you can find whatever. Educational institutions don't teach security. And then what happens is these folks come into the workforce and then they're told, all right, go build something, but they're also not given security training in their jobs. And the only time that happens is when something bad occurs. Then all of a sudden, oh yes, we need to have the security training. Let's make sure everybody has security training. But think about how many times you've gone to security course, okay, and come back, and then work happens, and then you forget completely about what you just learned. That happened to me with FCC 660, the SANS course, Advanced Penetration, Exploitation, and Penetration Testing. And I remember sitting there, and I was all excited, and they were talking about different advanced techniques. And at that moment, I was applying them, and it was cool. And then I got back, and then I haven't touched it. And so it goes out the door. And the same happens with developers. They might get some training, and then they forget about it. It just needs to be part of the normal day-to-day DNA, and it has to be incorporated into the way you're designing projects from the beginning. You might hear the term shift left a lot. And that just means let's start thinking about security from the very beginning of things, not just as an afterthought during the QA cycle. You have to think about what are the common patterns that can cause security issues? What are the best practices that we've learned over the course of the years, and document them so that any new developer that comes into the team can understand it. You need to think about how ingesting third-party code affects the security posture of your team. You know, like even today I was reading, there was there was NPM dependency flaws that got fixed, security vulnerabilities. And so those happen across the board. And it is not singling out NPM or Node. I mean, PyPy had it, RubyGems had it, PHP had it. All these different programming languages are susceptible at some point to somebody doing something to it. It's just fact of the matter. Dependency confusion was a great example of that. So I think what has to happen is that it has to be a combination of education, and not saying developers now need to be security professionals, but developers need some level of training to be security aware. And then complementing that process with tools that help developers identify these issues. And when they see these issues, I would hope developers would see it as QA bugs, because ultimately, when a piece of software has a vulnerability, that's a bug. That's what it is. We have to make this in the most simplistic terms sometimes. We think security vulnerabilities are these magical things, and we have these master hackers sitting out there, and every company thinks it's a nation state attacking them. No, I can tell you, it's not a nation state every single time. And a lot of times it's just very simple vulnerabilities that most people overlook. I mean, the fact that the OWASP top 10 just, my buddy Ty he tweeted out a link to the latest 2021 edition, and SQL injection is still there. So if OWASP is talking about SQL injection in 2021, and that tells you that these are bugs. These are bugs that we need to work on and fix, and developers should see that as part of their normal QA cycle. And so if you have tools and processes in place that integrate into your CI and CD pipelines, it makes that process easier, because ultimately we're human. Developers are going to make mistakes, bottom line. How about doing things that make their lives a little bit easier so that those mistakes are caught before they get pushed into production? And there's a whole suite of tools that can do that. And I promised I wouldn't turn this into some kind of marketing campaign, so I'm not going to do it. But I'm just going to say there's a whole suite of tools that can do that for you, okay? And help the development pipeline solve problems.
Yeah. I led you down that rabbit hole because I really wanted you to enlighten that, because I mean, for me, I say I look at the people and process and understand the technology, and I think you understand the technology and then you're helping to relate to the people and process. So you take it from a different approach, and like I sell security to the business and you sell security to the developers, or I enable the business and you enable the developers. We need everyone in this community. So as we approach the bottom of the hour, what one piece of sage advice would you give to someone looking to follow in your footsteps?
I would say network. Build a really strong network. A lot of people think that security is just a matter of learning stuff and you're in. I think that you can certainly do that. I think there are certainly opportunities nowadays to find jobs, but the bigger network you have, the greater those opportunities are for you. And I would say that with any field. In terms of learning security, what you can do is take it upon yourself to find the area that really excites you, and then just drive on that. You're not going to be the person who knows it all. What most people probably saw Mr. Robot, and of course, Elliot could do anything. The likelihood of you being Elliot and being that savant that's going to know how to do everything in cybersecurity is really small, because it's such a vast field. Find something that makes you really excited, and then become really good at that. And then from there, build a network, and network hopefully of like-minded people, and leverage that network to build visibility so you can find that good opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. For those of you on LinkedIn, don't forget to follow myself, follow Ray. For those of you on YouTube, hit subscribe, hit that notification button. And if you're listening to us on podcasts, share it with all your favorite developers, because we need them to learn about security too. We need to help promote this to everyone. We need that diversity of thought, background, experience. We need it from everyone. Ray, again, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. And a good Friday to everyone.
Thank you for having me, Chris.